The snow came down like a warning that night in Manhattan. Wet, heavy flakes stuck to the sidewalks and buried the neon lights until everything looked softer than it really was. Nina Quinn pulled her thin coat tighter around her shoulders, but the cold still slipped through, biting at her skin like tiny teeth. It had been hours since she had been put out on the street. One suitcase, a backpack, and the clothes she had worn 3 days in a row were all she had left. The landlord had thrown her out with half an apology and half a smirk. Her last paycheck never came. The diner she cleaned shut down overnight. No calls, no answers. She stood under the awning of the Blackwell Grand Hotel, the place she used to peek into through the service door when she carried trash bags out back. She used to dream about the lobby, warm and golden, with thick carpets and fresh flowers that smelled like money. She never belonged inside. Not really. Her fingers were so numb she could barely hold the handle of her bag. The city moved behind her. Taxis hissed through the slush, voices muffled by wind and scarves. No one looked at her twice. No one ever did. Nina Quinn was the kind of girl you stepped over if she fell. Deep in her coat pocket, she touched the folded photo of her mother, a young woman with the same wide eyes, holding Nina as a baby on a plastic chair in a tiny apartment. Her mother had worked until her bones gave out, and when she died, Nina promised herself no man would ever use her or ruin her the way her father had ruined her mother. She had never given her heart, never given her body, not once. She shivered so hard her teeth clicked. The door behind her opened with a breath of warm air. A man stepped out, shoes dark and polished like he had never walked a dirty street in his life. He paused when he saw her, his eyes as cold as the wind cutting at her cheeks. Adrian Blackwell did not believe in accidents. He believed in transactions, in leverage, in power. He ran the empire behind the name etched in gold above the hotel door. Yet, in that moment, he looked at the girl trembling in the snow and did not turn away. He said something to the man beside him, who stood in a black coat and looked more shadow than human. Then he stepped closer, close enough that Nina smelled the crispness of his suit and the faint cologne under it. He did not touch her. He did not smile. "You are going to freeze to death out here," he said. His voice was flat but not cruel. She wanted to answer, to say she would be fine, but her mouth did not work. Her eyes fluttered. The cold pulled her down like an anchor dropped in deep water. She heard his voice once more before the dark took her. "Take her upstairs. No hospital. I will handle this." When the doors of the hotel closed behind them, the city kept on forgetting her. But for the first time in her life, Nina Quinn had become someone a man like Adrian Blackwell could not ignore. Nina Quinn woke on sheets softer than anything she had ever touched. At first, she thought she was dreaming, but the steady hum of the city below the high windows reminded her she was very much awake. She pushed herself up on weak elbows and looked around the room. It was larger than the apartment she had shared with her mother. A glass wall framed a skyline dusted with snow. The blankets smelled faintly of cedar and something else, something expensive. She touched her wrist where an ivy drip had been. It was gone now, but a faint mark remained. On the nightstand sat a tray with water, tea, and toast she was too nervous to eat. She swung her legs off the bed and felt the thick carpet under her bare feet. She almost laughed at the absurdity. 1 night ago, she was begging the cold not to kill her. Now she stood in a penthouse that could feed her for a year if she sold one of the lamps. Nina's mother used to tell her that the world does not give second chances to girls like them. Her mother worked double shifts at a diner, scrubbed greasy floors, served coffee to men who stared too long. She taught Nina to keep her head down, to keep her legs crossed, to never trust any promise that sounded too sweet. Nina had lived by that rule all her life. She had never kissed a boy behind the school. She had never stayed out late on dates she never agreed to. She saved every dollar, planned every step, trusted no one except her mother, who was long gone. She thought about leaving the suite, but when she touched the doorknob, she found it locked. She was not a guest. She was a stray pulled in from the snow. Maybe a mistake. Maybe not. She sat back down and curled her knees to her chest. She did not want to cry, but her eyes burned. Hours passed before the door opened. The man from the street stepped inside like he owned not just the room but the air she breathed. Adrian Blackwell was taller than she remembered. In daylight he looked sharper, colder, his black coat draped over one arm, a file tucked under the other. He did not smile. She did not expect him to. He pulled out a chair and sat near the foot of her bed, eyes fixed on hers like he was reading something only he could see. "You are feeling better?" he said. It was not a question. She nodded but did not speak. He studied her in silence. Adrian Blackwell built his empire by studying people. He had no wife, no children, no gossip worth printing. His father's name opened doors for him once, but he learned early to keep those doors closed to everyone who wanted a piece of his throne. His father left him the company on one condition: if he did not marry and have a child within the next 2 years, the board could vote to strip him of control. Adrian never planned to marry. He did not believe in love. He believed in contracts, in leverage, in keeping secrets that could never be used against him. His uncle waited like a vulture for him to slip. His cousin smiled at his face and poisoned his name behind closed doors. He needed an heir. He needed a shield. And now, sitting in front of him, was a girl who had nothing. No money, no ties, no past worth digging into. Nina looked down at her hands. They were shaking. She tried to fold them in her lap, but he noticed. He noticed everything. "You want to ask why you are here," he said. His voice did not rise or fall. It was the same calm line from last night. She nodded again. He did not answer. Instead, he set the file on the nightstand and opened it. A contract, thick pages with signatures, and lines she could not read from where she sat. Nina Quinn, 22 years old, single, no dependents, no record, no debts except the life she now owed him. She did not know it yet, but Adrian Blackwell had already read every piece of her story. He knew where she was born, where she last worked, who her landlord was, and why he threw her out. He knew she was untouched, unsullied. He knew the world would not notice if she disappeared for good. She looked at him then, really looked, searching for any sign that he might be kind under that expensive suit. But Adrian did not give away kindness for free. He leaned back in his chair, crossed one leg over the other, and waited for her to speak first. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. Her voice sounded too small in the giant room. Adrian did not answer right away. He wanted her to feel the weight of the silence pressing on her skin like a cold hand. Then he said it. The words he had rehearsed 1,000 times, but never out loud. "I want you to marry me." For a long moment, Nina thought she had heard him wrong. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. She looked at his face, searching for a sign that he was joking, but there was nothing. Adrian Blackwell was not the kind of man who wasted breath on jokes. He watched her reaction the way a scientist watches a glass slide under a microscope. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked around the words, "You want me to marry you." He did not nod, did not look away. "I need a wife. I need an heir. I need someone who will not ask for more than what I can give." The words should have sounded cold, but to Nina they burned. She pushed her feet back under the covers, as if the blanket could shield her from the weight of what he had just said. "Why me?" The question came out small but steady. Adrian's mouth twitched like he almost smiled, but didn't. "Because you are no one, Miss Quinn. Because no one would think to look at you twice. Because no one will question your silence when you disappear into my life." She shook her head once, hard enough to make her hair fall over her face. "This is insane. You cannot just buy someone's life like that." Adrian reached for the contract and flipped it open, sliding it toward her. "Read it before you say no." She stared at the words on the page, but they blurred together. Her eyes jumped from line to line, catching only pieces. 1 year of marriage, 1 child, no claim to his assets beyond what was written, a separate account in her name, enough money to pay off debts she did not have, enough to buy a life she could never imagine. He watched her scan the page. His voice softened just slightly. "You're cold, hungry, and have nowhere to go. You can work yourself to the bone for scraps for the rest of your life, or you can give me what I need and in return never worry about the cold again." Her throat tightened. "This is not a normal marriage." She tried to sound braver than she felt. He tilted his head. "It is not normal, but it is legal, binding, and clean. I do not expect love. I expect a child and your silence." The word child made her chest ache. She had never let herself think about that, about love or touch or babies. She had locked that part of her away so deep she almost forgot it was there. Her mother had given everything for her, and Nina had promised she would never be careless with her body or her heart. She whispered the truth before she could swallow it back. "I am a virgin." For the first time, Adrian's eyes flickered. He did not look away, but something unreadable passed behind his cold stare. "Good." The word stunned her. She almost laughed, but the sound caught in her throat. He did not flinch. "It means I do not have to wonder who the child belongs to. It means you are untouched by the world I live in. It means you are clean." Nina's stomach turned. She pushed the contract back at him. "I am not doing this. I would rather sleep on the street than sell myself to you like cattle." He did not touch the pages. He leaned back in his chair like he had all the time in the world. "You are free to leave whenever you want, Miss Quinn, but when you walk out that door, the world outside will not be kind. It never has been, and you know it." She stood too fast. Her legs wobbled, but she forced them to hold her weight. "I will find another job. I will find a room. I do not need you." She was half shouting now, her voice bouncing off the polished walls. Adrian stayed perfectly still. The only sound was the faint tick of a clock behind him. "You do not need me tonight," he said, voice low. "But tomorrow, when the snow is deeper and the hunger comes back?" He stood then, slow, deliberate. He was so close she could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. "I am offering you shelter, protection, and freedom from fear. All I ask is that you give me a child, and in return you get to vanish, with more money than you could make in 20 years of scrubbing floors." His words made her feel small and seen all at once. She hated him for it. She hated herself for hearing the small voice in her head that wondered what it would feel like to never be cold again. She pushed past him. Her hand fumbled at the door, but it was unlocked now. She pulled it open and felt the bite of the hotel hallways chill on her bare feet. Behind her, Adrian said nothing. He did not follow. He did not raise his voice. The door clicked shut when she stepped out, and the silence swallowed her. She moved fast down the corridor, hugging her arms around her chest. The elevator doors gleamed like a way out, but her reflection in the polished metal looked like a ghost. On the street, the snow came heavier. She walked with her suitcase bumping her ankles until her hands went numb. Cars splashed through dirty slush, but no one stopped. She thought about her mother, about the promises she made. She thought about a child, her child. Her throat tightened until she could not breathe. She sat on the steps of a closed shop and pulled her coat tighter, but the cold found its way in. The city lights blurred behind a sheen of tears she refused to let fall. Hours passed, but she could not feel them. At some point she must have slept, because when she opened her eyes, a soft dawn glow painted the buildings pink and gold. Her teeth chattered so hard her jaw ached. A shadow fell over her. She looked up, ready to curse whatever stranger thought he could take advantage of a girl like her. But it was not a stranger. Adrian Blackwell stood there, his long coat catching flakes of snow that melted instantly. He did not crouch or kneel. He did not soften his tone. "Are you ready to listen now?" His voice held no triumph, no cruelty, just cold truth. She wanted to spit at him. She wanted to scream. Instead, she dropped her gaze to her frozen hands and whispered, "I cannot give you what you want." He stepped closer, so his polished shoes brushed the edge of her boot. "I am not asking for your love, Nina. I am asking for your body and your silence. 1 year, 1 child. Then you walk away, richer than you ever dreamed. She lifted her eyes. They burned like fire against the wind. And if I say no again? Adrian's mouth curved just slightly. Then you stay here and freeze, and the city forgets your name by tomorrow morning. He held out a gloved hand. One small gesture that weighed more than any promise she had ever been given. For a second, she did not move. Then she forced her numb fingers to wrap around his. He pulled her up to stand and did not let go until she stopped shivering. He looked down at her, like she was a puzzle he had already solved. I will not be yours, she said. Her voice cracked, but she forced the words out anyway. Adrian's eyes did not soften, but his grip on her hand did. No, he said. You will be mine until you give me an heir. Then you will belong only to yourself. And for the first time, Nina Quinn understood what kind of cage she was stepping into. A warm cage, lined with silk sheets and money, but a cage all the same. The next days blurred like a fever Nina could not shake. She woke in a new room, still in the Blackwell Tower, but different from the suite where she had first opened her eyes. This one was smaller, but still bigger than anything she had ever called home. The bed was a cloud of soft blankets. The windows overlooked the river, where the ice clung to the shore like claws. Adrian had arranged everything before she signed a single page. A closet filled with warm clothes in her size, meals that appeared at the door 3 times a day, a doctor who checked her health, politely silent, eyes averted when he asked private questions. She stayed inside mostly. Some part of her feared that if she stepped into the elevator, she would lose her nerve. Adrian came only once a day, always the same time. He never knocked. He would stand just inside the doorway, dark coat unbuttoned, gloves in hand. He spoke only about the contract, about timing, about clinics and lawyers and the official wedding license that would be filed soon. His eyes never touched her like a woman, only as a means to an end. One night she lay awake on the couch near the tall window. The city lights winked back at her like cold eyes. She tried to picture herself pregnant, heavy with the child of a man who did not even want her touch except for the part that would secure his throne. She pressed a hand to her stomach. Nothing there yet, just a future waiting like a weight she could not name. The next morning, she asked him one question as he signed another document in her presence. What happens if I run? He did not lift his eyes from the page. Then I will find you. His voice was so calm it made her skin prickle. He set the pen down and looked up. If you run before you give me what I need, you will lose every protection I have given you. Your world will not change because it has never cared. But if you stay, you leave richer, untouched by fear, with a new name and no debt to anyone. She stared at him. There was no threat in his tone, but it was still a prison. That night, she packed a bag anyway. She waited until the security outside her door changed shifts. She knew they watched the hallway. She knew they had orders to keep her in. But she was small and quiet and desperate. She slipped through the side stairwell barefoot, coat pulled tight, the little money she had hidden in the lining of her bag. The snow bit at her ankles the second she stepped out the service door. She ran, past the doorman who did not look twice, past the glass windows where warm bodies laughed over wine. She told herself she would make it. She would disappear like her mother had taught her. Keep moving, stay small. Do not trust what shines too bright. For 3 nights she hid in cheap motels near the edge of the city. She changed her name again when she checked in, paid in cash, avoided cameras. She kept the lights off when she showered. She thought about the tiny life that might be growing inside her and hated how part of her still felt clean because she had not yet given him what he wanted. On the 4th night, she felt eyes on her back while she waited for the bus that would take her out past the last subway line. A black car idled at the curb across the street. She turned away, but the door opened anyway. A man stepped out. Not Adrian. Someone else in a black coat, faced blank like polished stone. She dropped her bag and ran. Her shoes slapped the ice. Her breath tore her throat raw. She did not make it half a block before a hand caught her arm. "Miss Quinn." His voice was polite, almost gentle. She twisted, tried to bite, but he held her firm without hurting her. "Mr. Blackwell wants you home. He does not want you cold again." She shook her head so hard her hair stuck to her lips. "I am not going back." She dug her feet into the snow. The man did not argue. He lifted her gently like she weighed nothing and carried her to the car. Inside the back seat, she found warmth again, but it burned her skin worse than the cold. Adrian sat across from her. He did not raise his voice. He did not look angry. That made it worse. "You could have frozen to death alone out here," he said. She pressed her fists to her eyes so she would not see him. "I would rather die than be yours like this." He tilted his head like he did when reading a page he already knew by heart. "Do you really believe that?" The car hummed through dark streets while the city kept forgetting her name. She thought about throwing herself out the door when they stopped, but the locks clicked shut before she could reach for them. Adrian watched her without blinking. "You think freedom is real out there for someone like you?" he asked. His voice was soft enough to cut skin. "Freedom is the lie they sell people like you to keep you working until you break. You want out. You want more than scraps. Then take what I offer." She did not answer. He did not force her to. The car pulled up to the tower, and the same door that once spat her out swallowed her whole again. Back in her warm cage, she dropped the bag on the floor and pressed her palms to the glass wall until her breath fogged the skyline. Behind her, the door shut without a sound. The next day, she found a lock on her window that had not been there before. The next night, she found a security camera blinking red in the corner of her ceiling. She stared at it until her eyes burned. If she screamed, would anyone hear? If she vanished, would anyone care? When Adrian came again, he brought another file, a wedding date, a medical schedule. He spoke like a man planning a business merger. When she refused to sit, he stood too. His shadow fell over her face like night swallowing the sun. He said nothing about the run, nothing about her cold feet. He only said one thing that stuck in her chest like a thorn. "I will not lose what I have built because you are afraid to live a life bigger than the one you crawled out of." She wanted to slap him. She wanted to beg him to touch her like a man and not a contract, but she did neither. She stood so still, the cold in her blood felt warmer than the fire in his words. He turned away first, as if dismissing her back to her soft prison. That night she lay awake, counting heartbeats that felt borrowed. If she ran again, he would find her. If she stayed, she would give him a piece of herself she had guarded all her life. The city hummed outside her glass wall, alive and blind. She pressed her hand to her stomach. Maybe there was no baby yet. Maybe she still had a choice. Maybe tomorrow she would find the door unlocked. Maybe tomorrow she would not be afraid. But tomorrow came, and the lock held. The glass held. And Adrian Blackwell waited for nothing except her yes. Days turned into weeks, but Nina felt each sunrise like a clock ticking inside her chest. She no longer asked for the door to be opened because she knew it never would be unless he allowed it. Adrian Blackwell's visits grew longer but not warmer. He would sit near her while she picked at her untouched dinner, his eyes skimming contracts or phone screens, his voice always calm, always measured. He never touched her except for the brief moment when he guided her to sign another paper or nodded to the doctor who checked her health with clinical detachment. Sometimes late at night, she would press her palms against the cold glass and wonder if she could shatter it, crawl out and vanish among the city's frozen veins. But every morning she woke in the same soft prison. She tried not to look at him when he entered, but her eyes betrayed her. She wanted him to see her as more than a vessel, wanted him to hesitate. He never did. One night he came earlier than usual. He found her curled up on the couch, sketching patterns on a scrap of paper with a pen she had hidden away like a secret. He sat down across from her, the contract in his hand. When he spoke, his voice was softer than the silence. "It is time to finalize this." She didn't look up. Her fingers kept moving, drawing tiny spirals that broke and twisted on the page. "I do not want to do this." Adrian's jaw flexed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the pages balanced between his fingers. "You agreed, Nina." She laughed, but it came out broken. "I never agreed. I survived. There's a difference." He did not flinch. He let the words hang heavy in the warm air between them. Then he placed the contract on the coffee table and reached out, his hand brushing her chin. The first real touch. She froze. His thumb rested just beneath her lip, tracing the soft tremble he found there. "You think I do not see you," he said. His breath carried the faint scent of something dark and bitter, coffee and midnight secrets. She could not move. His touch was not tender, but it was careful. "I see you more clearly than you want." He moved closer, his knee brushing hers. She should have pulled away, but her body stayed rooted. His other hand found her wrist, the one she always hid beneath her sleeve like it might break. "Do you know what I see?" he asked. She didn't answer because she could not. He dipped his head until his mouth was near her ear. "I see a girl who wants to run but stays. I see someone who pretends she is brave when she is terrified of what it means to want more." She shivered, but the room was warm. His mouth brushed her cheek. "Not a kiss, not yet. You have something no one else does. You still believe in things that cannot be bought." He pulled back enough to look at her face. His eyes were not cold now, but sharp, burning with something she could not name. When he leaned in, she turned her head, but not enough. His lips found the edge of her jaw, a whisper of heat that made her chest squeeze tight. She whispered, "Don't," but her voice betrayed her. He tasted the word on her skin and ignored it. His mouth moved lower, tracing the curve of her neck where her pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. "This is what you want to keep hidden," he murmured, "that even if you hate me, your body does not know how to lie." She jerked back, but his grip on her wrist held her steady. His mouth hovered at her throat, a promise and a threat at once. He did not push her down, did not force her legs apart, but the closeness was enough to set fire to every rule she had built inside herself. "If you want a child," she said, her voice cracking, "so take it, get it over with." Her defiance tasted like salt on her tongue. Adrian froze, his lips brushing her collarbone. Slowly, he pulled back until he was staring at her again, his eyes darker than any night. "Do you think that is what I want? That I want to force this?" She spat the words before fear could silence her. "Isn't that what this is? A warm cage, a signed paper, a baby I never asked for?" He let her wrist go like it burned him. He stood, back straight, jaw clenched so tight a vein pulsed at his temple. "Do you think I do not know what it means to be trapped?" He said it so low she almost didn't catch it. "Do you think I chose this any more than you did?" He paced to the window, staring out at the city as if it might answer him. He didn't turn back when he spoke again. "You think your cage is silk and gold. Mine is steel and stone. Do you think they let me keep this empire because I was strong? No. They let me keep it because I am useful. Because I do what I must. And you, Nina, you are part of that price." She hated that his words struck something inside her chest that felt too much like truth. She hated that part of her wanted to run to him and pull the cold out of his voice, but she didn't. She crossed her arms over her chest, her voice trembling. "So what now? Do you take what you need, or do you keep pretending this is a choice?" He turned back to her then, and in his eyes she saw the billionaire stripped bare for just one heartbeat. His mouth moved, but no words came. Then he stepped forward, reached out, and she flinched. But his hand didn't grab her. It fell instead to his side. "Tomorrow," he said. His voice cracked at the edge like ice breaking on a frozen river. "Tomorrow you sign. Tomorrow you decide if you stay or if you freeze alone again." He turned and left without looking back. The next morning she woke with her head pounding. On the table by her bed lay a single envelope, inside it a ticket, a single note written in his clean, sharp handwriting. One last door open, one last chance to walk. She held it all day, folding and unfolding it until the paper grew soft at the edges. She pictured her mother's voice whispering, "Keep your head down, Nina. Don't trust promises dressed in gold. Don't sell the last thing you have." By nightfall, she stood by the window, the ticket pressed to her chest. The city below didn't care if she stayed or ran. The world inside his walls offered warmth at the cost of her name. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I don't want to belong to him." But her heartbeat stuttered. She knew deep down she already did, not because he forced her body, but because somewhere in that cold gaze she found something that looked like her own reflection. When the door opened behind her, she didn't turn. She felt him step close, the heat of his breath at her shoulder. His voice was low and rough. "Decide." His hand brushed her hip, barely a touch, but enough to set her skin alight. She swallowed hard, but didn't move. "And if I say yes?" she whispered. He didn't answer with words. His mouth found the curve of her neck again, softer this time, slower, as if tasting a truth too fragile to speak. His hand slipped to her waist, but didn't force her closer. When she turned her face, their lips brushed, heat blooming where fear once lived. Her voice was barely a breath. "I hate you." He kissed her like an apology, like a promise. His hands were careful, but his mouth was hungry. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears when he pulled her closer until nothing existed except the space where her skin met his. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "You will not hate me forever," he said. But she heard the lie beneath the hope, and for the first time she wondered if this cage could be softer than the freedom she once believed in. The next morning, Nina woke before the sun rose. She lay still in the wide bed Adrian had forced her to accept. The silk sheets felt too soft against her skin, a reminder of how little she owned in this place that called itself safety. She pressed her hand to her stomach. There was no child yet. At least, the tests so far said so. But the thought of it pulsed in her chest like a secret she could not quiet. When Adrian entered the room, he did not knock. He never did. He stood by the door, watching her in the half-light. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, the ink of old contracts and colder wars hidden beneath his calm voice. He said her name softly, "Nina," as if it still belonged to her. She sat up, slowly pulling the blanket around her shoulders like armor. She did not say his name. She would not give him that. He stepped closer and placed a folder on the small table by her bed. Inside was another piece of paper waiting for her signature, this one not just about the child, but about what came after. A marriage license with a hidden clause, a promise of inheritance for an heir not yet conceived. Nina looked at the neat lines, the blank space for her signature. She looked at his face too, searching for some crack in that stone mask. She found nothing but shadow and resolve. "Why me?" she asked finally, her voice raw from sleep and unshed anger. Out of all the women in this city, why pick the girl who had nothing to lose? Adrian's jaw tightened just slightly, but enough for her to see it. "Because you have nothing to lose," he said, "and nothing to sell except the one thing no one else can claim." He stepped closer until the edge of the bed touched his knees. He lowered his voice, "Because they would tear me apart if I chose someone who could use my secrets. They can buy loyalty, but they cannot buy innocence twice." His words cut her deeper than she expected. She wanted to spit at him, to tell him innocence was not a commodity to be measured in court papers and bloodlines. But the words tangled in her throat when he leaned down, his hands braced on either side of her, his face so close she could taste the bitterness on his breath. "You think you're the only prisoner here, Nina? Look around you. This is my cage too." She turned her face away, but he did not pull back. Instead, he whispered, "There are men at my father's table who would see me ruined. They would gut this family, sell it piece by piece to wolves in foreign suits. They smile at me, but behind their eyes they want me dead. A child, our child, gives me power they cannot touch, and gives you freedom you have never known." She forced herself to look at him. "And what about love?" she asked, the word foreign on her tongue. His eyes flickered, the only sign he might be more man than monster. "Love is a luxury," he said quietly. "Something men like me are not allowed." She searched his face for a lie and found only a truth she hated more. That night she could not sleep. She paced the length of the room until her feet ached. She thought of the envelope still tucked in the drawer beside her bed, the one he gave her as a final door, a single plane ticket, no name, no return address. Just a promise of escape she no longer believed in. At midnight she found herself at the window again, pressing her forehead to the cold glass. Below her the city breathed, indifferent and bright. She imagined herself somewhere far away, a new name, no cage, no contract. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Adrian's face, the sharp lines of his anger, the softness he tried to bury when he looked at her. She hated herself for wanting to believe he was more than his family's chains. The next morning brought snow that buried the city in silence. Adrian called for her to meet him in the study. The room was a fortress of old books and colder truths. She sat across from him at the long oak table, the contract between them like a blade. He said nothing at first, he only watched her. Then, without looking away, he slid a small envelope across the table. Inside were photographs, grainy, old, edges curled by time. Her mother, young and pretty, standing beside a man Nina did not recognize, but whose eyes mirrored Adrian's. Her breath caught when she flipped to the next. Her mother pregnant. The man's arm around her shoulders like a promise no one kept. Adrian's voice was so low she almost missed it. "Your mother was once promised to this family. Before you were born, she ran. My father made sure no one ever found her. Except me. I found her records, buried in a drawer no one was meant to open, and I found you." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Nina's feet. Her mother's warnings whispered in her ears now like a ghost. "Do not trust what shines too bright. They will take what you have and leave you with nothing but your own name." "You knew," Nina said, her hands trembling over the photos. "You knew who I was before you ever pulled me out of that alley." Adrian's eyes did not flinch. Yes, his honesty felt colder than any lie. "So this was not chance," she whispered. "Not rescue. A hunt." He leaned forward then, his hands open on the table. "No," he said, "it was a way to keep you alive. If they knew who you were, they would have buried you too. This," he tapped the contract, "is ugly, but it is survival. For both of us." Nina stood so fast the chair scraped across the polished floor. She wanted to run again, but this time there was nowhere to go. She turned to the door, but his voice stopped her like a blade pressed to her back. "Nina." She froze. His tone was not a command this time. It was a plea. She turned slowly. Adrian had never looked smaller than he did then, seated beneath the portraits of dead men who still ruled him. "Do you hate me?" he asked, his voice rough. The mask cracked at the edges. She wanted to say yes, she wanted to scream it, but the word refused to come. Instead, she whispered, "I hate what you make me feel." He stood then, closing the space between them. He did not touch her. He only looked down at her, his eyes dark and unguarded for the first time. "You think I do not feel it too? If I could want anyone else, I would. If I could leave you untouched, I would, but I cannot." When he finally reached for her, his touch was not cold. His hand cupped her jaw, thumb brushing away a tear she did not want him to see. She hated how her body leaned into him, how his warmth felt like an answer she had no right to want. Then his mouth found hers, slow, careful, nothing like the forced promise she feared. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "Give me this," he whispered. "Just this. I swear I will make you free when it is done." She wanted to laugh, but the sound stuck in her throat. "And if I say no?" His answer was honest. "Then you leave tonight, and I will never find you again." His hand dropped from her face. The contract lay waiting on the table. The snow outside fell in soft, silent judgment. Nina stepped back until the cold wall touched her spine. She looked at him, at the paper, at the door. She thought of her mother's ghost and the life waiting inside her that might never be born. She thought of freedom that tasted like ice and chains that tasted like his kiss. She whispered the words she never thought she would say. "I am afraid." Adrian's eyes closed like a man at confession. "So am I," he said, and when he opened them again, she knew her choice was already made. Nina did not remember walking to the contract. She only knew her hand trembled when she picked up the pen. Adrian stood behind her, silent as the snow falling beyond the glass. When she pressed the ink to the paper, she felt something inside her chest break and mend at the same time. He did not speak when she finished. He only exhaled a breath he had been holding for too long. She turned to him, waiting for the cold finality she expected, but instead he reached for her hand. His fingers were warm, rougher than she ever noticed before. He did not kiss her then. He only looked at her as if memorizing the shape of her defiance, the line of her fear. She wanted to pull away, but did not. The days that followed were not soft. The world outside his walls spun with whispers. Headlines speculated about the billionaire's sudden engagement, about the girl no one could find a past for. In the city's quiet corners, men in suits made calls, calculated what her name meant for their ledgers. Nina learned to move through the halls of his penthouse like a ghost who refused to vanish. Adrian did not keep her locked in her room anymore, but the walls still felt like chains some night. One evening when the snow turned to rain, she found him standing alone on the balcony, his shirt sleeves soaked, the city lights reflected in his tired eyes. She stepped close enough for the wind to catch her hair, brush it across his cheek. He did not flinch. "You could leave now," he said, his voice raw from truths he rarely spoke. "The contract is signed, the deal is done. You owe me nothing more." She laughed, soft and small, the sound surprising both of them. "Never owed you," she said, "but maybe you owe me." He turned, then, his eyes searching hers as if the answer might save him. "What do you want?" he asked. Her hand lifted slowly, resting against his chest, where his heart beat steady and stubborn beneath her palm. "I want you to remember what it means to live for something you cannot buy." His breath caught like a man learning to speak for the first time. "And if I fail, you won't?" she said simply. "Because now you have something to lose." That night they lay beside each other, not as prisoner and warden, not as contract and price, but as two people who chose to stay when running was easier. His fingers traced the curve of her wrist, the same wrist he once gripped like a claim. Her head rested on his shoulder, her voice low against his skin. "My mother once told me, the only thing worth giving is what cannot be taken." He asked her softly, "What did you give me, Nina?" She closed her eyes, a small, tired smile at the corner of her mouth. "A reason," she whispered. Outside the world kept its distance, the rain erasing footprints, secrets whispered to windows that never opened. Inside, a billionaire and a girl who once shivered alone on a street corner found warmth not in a deal, not in an air, but in the quiet truth that sometimes the wrong cage is just a doorway waiting to be unlocked. When dawn came, she woke first, watching him sleep. For a moment he looked younger, softer, free in a way she knew he could never be fully free, but maybe free enough. She pressed her lips to his forehead, careful not to wake him, and whispered the only vow that mattered. "I am not yours because of paper or power or blood. I am yours because I choose to be, and when I choose to go, it will be for love, not for escape." And when he woke to find her still there, her silhouette framed by a sky no longer dark, Adrian Blackwell finally understood the truth his father never taught him. Some legacies are not built with money or threats, but with a single fragile thing left unbroken: trust. Sometimes the only freedom worth keeping is the one you give each other when you could so easily take it away.